All right, then, people. Hi there. Welcome to our program. This is Milad Resaeimanesh, of course, and this is a podcast and a live YouTube program running by the Central Committee of Ex-Muslim in Scandinavia. As you guys most probably know, there is like a women's revolution, anti-hijab mass protest in Iran at the moment. The whole world is talking about it, and we have seen so many videos, like a footages, great footages of the brain girls and boys like fighting against Islamism and Islamic regime in Iran. Such a movement is now very big and global in Europe and North America as well. There's like so many protests taking place at the moment, including Stockholm and Sweden. At the panel, my friends and my colleagues, Zara Kay is with us. Another program, another week. Thank you, Zara, for being here. It's a pleasure to have you here. I'm pretty sure you had so many things to share with us, and there are so many things, so many interesting things. Zara can share about the topic we're supposed to talk about tonight. Zara, first of all, you were at the center of Stockholm today. I think it was in Stureplan. There was a massive, big demonstration with all the lead, not all, but most of the leaders of the political parties. So many parliament members, so many big names at the demonstration supporting the anti-hijab protest in Iran, if you can call it anti-protest. Some people say it's against the whole government, and they would like to downfall the Islamic regime of Iran. As a person who is not originally Iranian, and as a person who don't speak Persian, how you evaluate the incidents happening at the moment in Iran and the demonstration happening outside the country?
Thanks for having me, first of all. The protest was, this one was in Norrmalmstorg. There were probably others as well, because, this one had a few hundred, or if not more, people. And I'm sure there are other protests happening. I'm just trying to follow whatever is in the Svenska Iranian group. But yeah, no, I guess some context to why I am particularly passionate about the Islamic revolution in Iran as a whole is because when the Islamic revolution happened, and myself, I come from a Shia background, it affected a lot of other countries as well. A clear example was my mom grew up not wearing a hijab, maybe like a light scarf, while her mom was a full niqabi, and it was never imposed on her until she got married and then did it. And for me, because everybody in the community was doing it, well, if Iran is doing it and enforcing it, what's stopping us Shias from doing this in our own communities, because we're Muslims as well and hijab is mandatory. So I've seen a lot of that. We've seen Iran, I guess, coming from the community, we've always seen Iran in such a high regard that we would never dare to challenge. So the Salman Rushdie attack, the fatwa, anything coming from Iran, basically, even the death of Qasem Soleimani through Trump's nuclear drones, or the drone strike. In Tanzania, it was like, oh, Shahid, like martyr, Qasem Soleimani. He was so amazing, and all of his crimes were suddenly vanished. People who had never heard of his name, but because the West did it, it's all, it's war now, and that's how we've been raised. We've always been raised anti-government, not anti-government, sorry, anti-Westernization, but also specifically, we hated America. So America's invasion to Iraq, Afghanistan, many other things. I'm not going to take sides in that on like where I stand. I think it needs a lot more nuance. But because Iran supported it and because Ayatollah Khomeini had started it, I think it was we just held it so sacred. So for me to see this revolution happening from people in Iran, first of all, amazing, brave women. But I think most of the Iranians I've met outside Iran, and some I know in Iran, have always been in opposition of the government, if not mostly atheist. But even those who are Muslims or I guess mostly practicing Muslims, would not stand for the government. And it really shocks me to see people outside trying to spread this propaganda that, Muslims want the government, except they're not the only ones in the country. They're not the only ones that have to suffer. No, sorry, they're not the only ones that get to, I guess, enjoy the government. Everybody else who doesn't has to too. And it's
Mhm.
not a true democracy. It's never been a true democracy since the Islamic Revolution. So I'm really in awe of the people in Iran standing up against it. But even more so, seeing some of the Muslims do it has been really enlightening. It kind of
Yeah,
shows the solidarity, like listening to people like Fatima, I forgot her last name, but even just seeing her stand up for it, like any short form of solidarity has been really good. I was actually surprised by seeing, I think she's a convert, an American TikToker, YouTuber, taking out her hijab in solidarity. Not that she's
mhm.
completely taken it off, but for that protest, that's what she did. Because she's like, this cannot be used as a form to control people. If I choose
Yeah,
to wear it, I will choose to wear it. And I thought that was such a balanced position. Like it was in solidarity. She's not enforcing it on other people. She wants to wear it. She was never raised with wearing it. And that's where I think it brings in a bit more nuance into like, is this a choice? Is this not a choice? Do I like wearing it? And a lot of people have moved the conversation of hijab from being forced, especially in the West, to let me obviously like sparkle it up and design it and wear it as an accessory. And
true.
I
Like,
think,
yep, sorry for interrupt, but like,
no,
according to my own experience, like, after living for almost like 16 years in Europe, they always say, like, I've been heard this sentence a lot, that the people of Middle East really like and believe in Islam. And Islamic regime is dictator, that's for sure. It's killing people, that's also true. But since people really believe in hijab and Islam, you cannot really do anything for those people. And like, what's happening in Iran at the moment, as you see, there's like, young generation of the Iranians burning their hijab, burning all the Islamic symbols, what the things that's supposed to be like holy. And if you be against them, you count it as apostacies. And like blasphemy law, which is like a death penalty, may comes to you if you, for example, burning the Ayatollah Khamenei picture or Khomeini's picture, or burning Quran, or burning your hijab. But all the things happening at the moment in Iran, there's like a awesome footages of the Iranian people doing this. So I think all these how to say judgments against the people of Iran and Middle East, general speaking, uh, it doesn't have anything related to reality. At least there is like a big population of the Iranian right now who don't believe in Islam. I don't want to practice Islam. I don't want to have Islamic government. They would like to live free. And the number of them has been grown up during the past couple of years at least. So I think it's about change. I think the whole how to say the
absolutely.
discourses, the political discourses in Europe is also affected. Like for me, as the chairman of the Central Committee of Ex-Muslim in Scandinavia, it was always very tough to go and talk by the politicians in the West and trying to like convince them to recognize the ex-Muslim movements. Today, I'm so happy to say that this is much easier. The discourse of ex-Muslim is much more recognized by the global community more than ever. So the like how you see, Zara, the role of ex-Muslim movement of the things happening in Iran and the rest of the world, you think?
I mean, I think one, it is pretty clear that in masses in Iran, people have opposed it. Masa Amini is, yes, central to the movement, but this anger and frustration has been going on for longer than like 30 to at least 40 years. When I went to the demonstration outside, there were old women who were very angry, emotional, sad, and those emotions were quite pent up. And this is one of the very few times, or maybe one of the only times in long history, that the protests have taken interest even outside Iran, and that people are standing for it. So this is their opportunity to show their dissent, their opportunity to kind of feel like they can take their home back because they've had to flee, for them to get their basic human rights. And I think the biggest problem here is the political side of Islam that is being enforced on everyone. And that's what makes it really tough for a lot of people that, Muslims or not, like even Muslims are at risk of political Islam because it's so hardly infringed on them. There's no leeway for any dissent. There's no leeway for, it's my faith, it's my personal thing. And that's what happens in theocracies. You're not able to distinguish the mosque and the state, and that everybody else is now, they now have to abide by this. Like, people are dying because Mahsa Amini's only crime was that she was a woman. Like, that was literally her only crime. Had she been born, had she been born as a man, it would have been different. Had she been born in another country as well.
Yeah, and Zara, they're saying like,
outcome.
because, sorry for interrupting, but like, they're saying like Zara is coming from the Kurdistan, so she was Iranian Kurdish, and she was coming from a very small city in Kurdistan, and she was very poor. So if you have somehow connected to the government, if you're rich, if you're coming from the capital, for example, the way that they, like, the Islamic police treat you is very different. So she was a good target. She was like, it's really easy for the Islamic regime, for the Islamic police to beat you if you're woman, and if you're coming from a very poor village in Iran, if you're woman and you're atheist, for example, if you're woman, or if you're Kurdish and communist, or if you're atheist, or if you're ex-Muslim, if you belong to this class of the society, it's much easier for such brutal government to oppress you, arrest you, torture you, and kill you. That's exactly what happened to Masa. But I would like to ask this question, like, young atheists saying, like, he's from Pakistan, he's a big fan of you, Zara, by the way. He's saying, if Iran becomes a secular state, how it would affect the whole world, specifically the ex-Muslim movement?
I think one, that would be a massive win for humanity worldwide. This is millions of people that have suffered in their own countries, in their own homes as well. Like, a lot of people who have been children, like a lot of children who've had strict parents, are now going to at least have the government protect them as well. But at the same time, never in a million years had I thought that Iran would be setting the standards of what is human rights, actually. I mean, I know a lot of countries have, but to be in that for 40 years, to be neglected by so many countries in the West, and then to have this movement from starting from people in Iran, for it to escalate, like, that is setting standards. That is telling me that if we can do this now, and if we can have this much outrage for, like, against human rights and against people's rights, then there is no saying, like, where can we have such rights, and what kind of what kind of laws are we able to accommodate to be more humanist in the world as well? Like, there are so many laws, like, around the world, even in the West, like blasphemy laws exist in, not too long ago, in Austria, for instance. Somebody was fined for it. And that we're not, like, in the West, we're so, I guess we have a form of censorship here that also affects us. And Iran is setting the example of, no, you don't like it, you don't have to listen to it. You can't stop my speech. You can't stop me from exercising my basic human rights, which is to dissent. And I think it'll be a really good movement to then held as an example in history that if Iran could do this, other countries can. What is shameful is that 79, so like 33 years ago, when the Islamic Revolution happened, nobody had social media, for instance. Not a lot of news was going out. Every time ex-Muslims have had the discussion about hijab and being against the hijab in general, we've always pointed towards Iranian women. Even if Saudi have kind of relaxed their laws now, I mean, it's not better, but like Iranian women have suffered quite a bit. Like not quite a bit, quite a lot, sorry.
Very lot,
And
yeah.
for them to be setting the standard for a lot of people, even seeing Muslim women burn their own hijab, going like, I don't want this. I may wear it now, but I do not want this to be forced on other people, I think is phenomenal. And I
Yeah.
don't, and I think I'm intentionally trying to not exclude Muslims from this movement because I feel like they play a key part in how they enforce or how they impose or not impose or learn from it to other people, because I think that your faith should be personal. Like your faith, the way you're practicing has to be personal. Like this is you. And that, I'm not going to stop you from being you. You want to wear hijab, do it. I'm
Yeah.
not going to glorify it, but I'm going to respect your right as a human being to do that. And I expect every adult woman, I think if you're in the
Respect
West,
you as a
even
Muslim.
adult women,
Yeah.
and that yeah, as an ex-Muslim, absolutely. Like you're in the West, you're a woman, and you're not going to be hurt by anybody around you, including your family. Then you bear the burden of responsibility to your choices, even if you're indoctrined from a young age. I'm not going to claim that all women who wear the hijab in the West are oppressed in some way. I do think that there's very little choice given from our upbringing that carries on later on. But then as you're an adult, I think that falls on you. Like that's your responsibility. So if you're actively choosing it, please go ahead and do it.
Yeah.
But I expect you to have the same. I expect you to have the same outlook on choice for other women as well.
Yeah.
Because I guess for me, like the last few days have been quite troubling to see that people from my community who live in the US have have had this propaganda. Yeah, exactly, propaganda that Masa Amini said was not police brutality, XYZ, blah, blah, and that no sources have verified it because no Iranian sources have verified it.
Mhm.
Around the world, her family, other people have, and Masa is not the first one who's faced this.
That's right.
Multiple women before Masa, 5 years ago, I think it was 5 or 3 years ago, Yasmin and
Zara.
Nasreen, like the lawyer.
Mhm.
Sorry.
Over 40
Yeah, I mean,
years.
all of the
Like these Islamic
exactly.
regime, at the very first point when they got the power, they were killing women. Like stoning, for
Yeah,
example, was very common, like 40 years ago. And like Mina Hadi, for example, the founder of ex-Muslim in Germany, always say like it was kind of shocking that like these mullahs, these Islamists, 40 years ago at the very beginning of the revolution, they start stoning women. They started with the
yeah,
prostitutes, yeah, and then
yeah.
women who
And
disobeyed.
previously, all this
Yeah.
information wouldn't come out because one, people were scared of their own country and regime, and it was only dissenters or even this very like I get. I think I'm trying to emphasize that we have evidence through social media. People have been taking these are not made up when you can see somebody getting killed. It's not one video, it's not two videos. These are hundreds and thousands of
Yeah,
videos
yeah.
over the years that proves to be your evidence. What else do you need to see? But then I read articles that say, oh, Khomeini has a softer approach. And I'm like, to what? To enforce Sharia law? To enforce hijab on women? How are you not questioning this authority that you have known as Shias outside who've had the choice
Hmm.
of the entire process? Like, it
Yeah,
is so sad to see other women
precisely. One,
excuse men's
mhm.
behavior towards women.
Yeah, one interesting point about the current rioting or revolution in Iran is like over the at least 10, 15 years, there has been like, I'm not saying 10, 15 years because I cannot remember before that, but over these like past 10 years at least, they have been like, there's so many materials regarding atheism and why atheism is logical and why it makes sense to be ex-Muslim and to convert to a non-believer. There are so many materials being produced for the people in Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran, Saudi Arabia, like the PDF of The God's Delusion, the book by Richard Dawkins, been downloaded thousands of times inside Saudi Arabia. It's also true with the Iranians. We have so many like scientists and big atheist name, and the Iranian, and they talk Persian, and they produce material for the people inside the country. And as you said, we have social media, we have internet, we have like these thousands of satellite channels, and the young generation of the Iranians are not blind. They know what's happening in the world. They see why it makes sense to be an atheist, and they don't accept the Islamic brutality. You just have a look at the footages. People are angry. Women are angry. They don't accept such a behaviors. Yeah.
I think one of the biggest driver is that as Muslims, you're raised to think Sharia law is the best law, no matter what, no matter the nuance between, the different interpretations or how it's implemented. So when those laws don't apply to you, you're a bit more relaxed about religion. Or when you're not actually in the brunt of it, you're a bit more relaxed. But for people who live there and question, why is this happening around me? How can this be okay? And also, I think the fact that information is passed on so easily now, seeing how the other world, the other side of the world handles their own problem, or how women are more empowered and free to do as they please. I think that in itself, like your situation, your environment, contributes a lot in how much you want to spend your time thinking about, can there be a world after this, or can there be a world outside of this, sorry, not after this. And I think that was similar to me. Like, well, I didn't have ultra conservative parents, but then seeing everybody in Tanzania, like having that confined space, that confined community, it was like a mini Iran, but not as bad because we weren't getting killed, but there was a lot of shame specifically. And I think especially when in countries you can have a choice and don't have the choice in that environment, it really makes you think, what is it about this religion that is turning people into monsters? Like, what is happening? And I bet this is how probably most ex-Muslims I know have had to evaluate, there has to be more. Something should make sense. So what am I not looking at? And I think that's where a lot of the journey begins, from reading these books, from exploring themselves. And I imagine for Iranians, it was a lot of that. I don't expect that all of them would know, quote unquote, everything about science, or like a lot of, I guess arguments against Islam, but it only takes a seed of doubt for you to explore more. I think in Iran that has happened quite a bit, because I personally, in my entire life, I've met one or two Iranian, and I say this as like the past 15 years, yeah, since I've lived abroad, one or two Iranians who are actually Muslims. hundreds of others. This is Malaysia, Australia, UK, here, and like maybe some in Tanzania, but I can't remember if I know something. But this is like 4 different continents that I've met, like Iranians who are not Muslims. Whether or not they would say it, whether or not they actually carry being an atheist as a flag, because they're only trying to live their life outside of it.
Yeah, and so it's not only with the people. It's not only with the Iranians living abroad. There was like a Croatian football coach visiting Iran and working in Iran for 2 years. And when he was out, he was saying like one very interesting things about Iran was like, I haven't seen one single Muslim in that country, and I haven't seen one single person who liked the government. And that was kind of shocking. Yeah. Like after 2 years, he said, and it's and that's a very fair point. That, like, there's like the massive movement of like converting to atheism, or like leaving Islam in country due to like the policy being followed by the Islamic regime against the people. I was talking to Richard Dawkins on the call seminar in the morning when we're having breakfast, and I was just saying like the number of Iranian turning atheist is rising. And Richard said, like, according to the statistics we have from the country, that's the point we can count on. The number of people leaving the religion it's growing, and the number is the number is not something that you can deny it or ignore it. It's a big number of the people turning like leaving Islam and leaving the religion. So I have a question right now regarding the policy in the West, specifically Sweden. As I said, it was kind of tough to like convince the like political parties or like organization who are in charge of adjusting the immigrants in the society. Most of these like leftists, like Social Democrats, Venstre Party, like Milio Party, these parties, they always like have this like Islam friendly policy and say like Islam is sort of like an identification of these like immigrants coming to Sweden. So we need, for the integration process, we need these imams and like Islamic institutes to help us these people be integrated to the society. But I think that discourse has changed. Like I'm very happy that this like Sweden Democrats is the second biggest, but one of the identification of SD is they are anti-Islam and they grow in. And I think this like such a discourse of like Islam friendly policy would be changed. So my question is like how you see the future in Europe, like how you see the like policies regarding Islamism and like Islamic government, like Islamic regime of Iran, Taliban, or maybe the government of Saudi Arabia. How you see the future regarding that part?
When I first came out as an ex-Muslim and you'd speak about Islam, you were told you're a Western agent, a foreign agent, you're paid to do this, or it was your experience and whatnot. This time around, with Afghanistan, Iran, and other cases, ex-Muslims didn't have to do much. The extremists did it for us. They proved the same point that we've been talking about for years, but happening in the West as well. And right now, I mean, it's the Islamists who are causing the far-right governments or the far-right people to exist in the first place because they have so much in common. Like hate begets hate, and that's what they're going to get. But what saddens me a lot is that there's so many liberal Muslims who are going to be caught in the crossfire as well. But I'm really glad that in a way we're, I guess, depending on ex-Muslims' position, but as a liberal, we're in a position to at least have our right of speech in, I guess, not in government, but like our right of speech in public more protected than religious feelings. Like Rasmus Paludan burning the Quran, don't like the guy, but it's still his free speech. I think his intentions were very skewed around it. But I think the point was that it was the Islamism in Sweden that actually proved themselves to be dangerous. And they were actually biting the bullet he wanted them to bite anyway. It was a lot of, I think for me, it was just like, well, what did you think was going to happen
Exactly,
when
like the
nobody
Islamic
in the
like gave
government.
him what he was looking for. Yeah.
Exactly. And I'm like, what did you think was going to happen when the left doesn't want to talk about it? The left doesn't want to do this. And I think we talked about it in our last podcast where it's so hard to politically assign yourself. But like, I think the fact that, people even quite central to secularism in general, that, we are trying to protect religious people's human rights and others without imposing one on the other and giving you the freedom to practice your religion, and that when you come back and ask other people to respect your ideas and neglect what secularism is actually trying to do, or actually creating more trouble for yourself because the other side will come back and go like, why do we need to do this? And that's basically the imposition of like, different groups and their ideas. And I think when we vouch for secularism, we're vouching for all religious, a-religious faiths to exist, but not to have any imposition on the state. And I think that is so important to emphasize, even as an atheist myself, like a very staunch atheist rather. I've always had to keep reminding myself that, I obviously know so many Muslims who are not like that, but I also know so many Muslims who are like that. So where is that middle ground where we can all coexist? Even if we don't like what we're wearing, even if we don't like what we're chanting, where is that middle ground? And I think because there hasn't been so much nuance brought into a lot of European governments, because it's either has to be pro-Islam or like very much anti-brown people. So I think there isn't much
Anti-brown
nuance
people,
there.
not necessarily anti-Islam. That's a very fair point.
Yeah,
I really wanted to like
because
know.
that's what happens.
Yeah, yeah. Well, they're not necessarily against the they against Islam. They against brown people, as you said. They against immigrants. General speaking, I would say. I really wanted to have like a person like a Mariam Namazi maybe in this program and talk about the challenges she's been through. Like I do remember there was no media, or at least like the mass medias, coming to Mariam and try to interview her. She was invited to some interviews, and some part of the interviews were cut it, or the whole like program was not published at all. Same scenario for Mina Hadi and many anti-Islam or like Islam critic, better to say, like ex-Muslim activists around the world. But right now we're talking September 2022. This has changed. There are like so many like medias interviewing with Mariam Namazi or Mina Hadi or like people like you, Zara, to see what's happening in the world of Islam, why there's like a rapid growth in atheism in such countries, and that's very overwhelming. I'm actually like, we lost Masa, we lost so many decent people. There was like a footage of this girl Hadith Najafi, like having her hair up and try and being prepared for demonstration, and they said she's been murdered by the Islamic police by 4 bullets, and her mom said like no, her face was full of bullets when I saw the dead body of her. We lost so many decent people, but still the movement is growing and is more powerful than ever. And these Western politicians, I think, the medias or the political parties must recognize the ex-Muslim movement, the atheist movement of the people coming from Middle East. What do you think about that? Young also is like asking the same question. What do you think gonna happen to religion, general speaking? She said in future by the fact that the atheism has a rapid growth. What do you think about that?
If I'm being completely honest, I think they'll still exist. They'll exist, but in minorities. And in a way, when it comes to education, I think a better form of education is to educate people about history and present, which will become history in the future. But I think the best way that I can think is the more information you absorb, the well known you are. So I think religions will still exist in minorities. But when you start giving people a choice, when countries like Iran start moving forward with a secular society, you give people the option of whether do you want to be religious or do you not. Admittedly, leaving religion is a lot harder, even if you're in a non-theocratic country, because it requires you to think about all those questions that people had previously asked you to fear from thinking. And that takes a toll, and that does take a lot of energy from somebody, and it takes a lot of, I guess, immense courage for somebody to explore this question, like life after death. Imagine somebody never telling us this concept of like hell and heaven. We would have been in a better place, to say the least. So I think these concepts will still exist, but even if my aspirations are that, it would become a myth at some point, I think they'll still exist. But I hope that a less rigid version or a less political version exists to give people the space to decide. But also, in some ways, I'm a big champion of pick and choose your religion or your parts of the religion, because there's so many people who can't let go of the idea of God, and they like, one or two parts of religion, not that they're exclusive to the religion, but I don't want to then go like, oh well, this is your life, because I've had so many young questioning Muslims or almost atheists come to me and they're like, what should I do now? Should I leave? Like, what do I do? Like, do I have to say I'm an ex-Muslim? Am I an atheist now? And I'm like, that's not my decision to make. That is your decision. You choose your path, whether you do it now, whether you do it later, whether you're cultural Muslim or spiritual Muslim. Like, it's entirely up to you. Because with my own family, I've had to go through this journey of showing them who I am, but also helping them understand that this is a tolerant side for you guys to explore as well. as in, you don't have to kill me because Islam says it. So you can still pick and choose what part of things that work for you and that are also humanist towards other people. So I feel like, not a lot of people will go like, there's, I guess not a lot of people that I know and have been friends with who are Muslims actually believe that I should be dead. And by no, I mean like people I actually engage with, because that's the circle I'm going to keep myself. So I just wanted to clarify, it's not like I don't know any other Muslims who would like to kill me. I'm just saying that there are a lot of people that wouldn't like to kill me, even if I blaspheme. It angers them, yes, but it took a lot of learning. And that those spaces exist for Muslims, and they rightfully
That's a very fair
should.
point. Like, I think if like we can remove or downfall the Islamic regime of Iran, for example, or like the Islamic regime in Turkey and like Saudi Arabia, these sort of countries, like we would see like the much more tolerance among the Muslim communities. Like as you said, they're gonna be like some part of like Islam working for some people, so there's gonna be like still Muslim in societies, but accepting the ex-Muslim, accepting like a member of family who are not not necessarily like practicing Islam, accepting LGBTQs like women who would like to have different lifestyle, ex-Muslim, or like the people who are coming from like Islamic background, but they don't want to practice it anymore. Accepting these people is becoming more normalized. It is getting normalized right now, but if there is no Islamic states like spending like millions of dollars every day to promote Islam, and as long as there are countries who kill people for being ex-Muslim, for leaving the government, for leaving the Islam and religion, we still like see that be intolerant and do not accepting the ex-Muslim or like atheist member of the family, or like group of people who are not religious, is still legitimate. There are people still like say it's fine. There are still people think it's all right and it's okay to not recognize the ex-Muslim or like LGBTQs and stuff. By downfalling this government, I think normalizing and the tolerance among the majority of Muslim communities would grow, and that would be a great news for the person like me, for example, or people who don't want to practice Islam necessarily.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, it would be nice that you were able to go back to Iran when you would like to, and that would
That
be
would
such
be another
a
feature.
yeah, I know, but like that would be really nice to have, people leave and then be able to come back without fearing that. And you're an activist, but there's so many people who still fear that because they've left a long time ago and they've lost so much of their culture, lost their homes, there's a lot that people have lost,
It's
and I
not
could
only
see that
Iran.
today.
There are like we cannot even go near Iran, like the country like
Yeah,
Turkey, and like, they're not even safe because like the Islamic regime kidnapping people. So for me, I cannot even
yeah,
travel to Turkey or Dubai. It's a country like this.
yeah.
So
No, that is absolutely true. I mean, again, it comes at such a big loss because you've just made that decision to be, I guess, just to be ex-Muslim, but also that inherently means that you're anti-Iranian government as well.
yeah.
Kind of, not always, not always. But I do think that's a big part of it as well, that when you fight for your rights, you're fighting for the other rights of Iranians who have dissented as well. And I think it comes at such a large cost that I think a lot of European governments don't want to acknowledge, because one, not only do they not know what to do about refugees or immigrants in general in terms of integration, imagine another subset of refugees that have complete different beliefs, possibly overlapping cultures as well, depending on where they're from. But now they have to put in more effort into catering towards, ideally, I hope, when ex-Muslims, Arabs, or Iranians, when they, um, I guess, seek refuge, they're put in the same camp as people they were trying to run away from. And that I think, yes, that creates more burden on European governments, but then this is why you have people's tax money. Spend them wisely instead of, arbitrary things. Like if you want to actually spend,
Wasting
I
the
get, to
money
me,
on the
exactly.
on mosques, for example. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, exactly. I mean, if you're collecting tax money, you ideally want to improve people's welfare, but also your future economical growth as well. And the best way you can do it is by investing back in the people and giving people the
That's a very
tools to
fair point.
be citizens, giving people the tools to be citizens that, will promote that mindset as well. But you've seen here where people are on welfare for years, for years. This isn't just like, I'm going to help you for like 3 years. This is 20 years of you being on welfare because you've managed to cheat the system, and that you've and that, as I guess I'm going to calculate myself as a Swede because I pay taxes. But as I guess as a Swedish resident, I don't want that to continue happening because it doesn't promote economical growth.
And I think like there are so many like ex-Muslim who are the citizens of the European countries, and they're also the taxpayers, and they're not happy like to pay for the mosques being sponsored, for example, by the Islamic regime. In Stockholm, there is this Imam Ali Center, and we know what they're doing. They're running like hijab seminars. They spy on oppositions, and there's like so many other things that like many taxpayers, including the immigrants, including Iranian ex-Muslim, are not happy. So why? How on earth actually? Like you collect the money and the tax from the taxpayers and pay it and waste it, I would say, on Islamic institutes and mosques. So that's a very fair point, I guess. Like Sweden and like Europe, general speaking, must learn how to use this budget wisely to integrate in a real manner, in a like a more practical way, to integrate the immigrants inside the society. Islam is not a solution, and I think that discourse must be recognized after these protests in Iran and many other countries. I think that's for today. If you want to add something, please do. And if you want to summarize, that would be great, because like it's now 45 minutes we running this program.
Yeah.
So yeah, the floor is yours. You can like summarize what you said if you like.
Perfect. I guess I'd just encourage to show up for those protests or to continue keeping those voices on. You have no idea how all of this actually contributes to change that we've all been waiting for, atheist or not. Whether, I think Muslims too need to engage in this worldwide, because you have the freedom to choose, and you should want other people to have the same freedom and the same rights you do. We always talk about Western feminists not looking at women of color, but these are women of color not caring about other women of color. And it's absolutely disgusting that the morality police includes women who beat up other women. Like, that is internalized misogyny and patriarchy at its peak. I mean, it's easier to just go on and keep blaming men, but this is women upholding patriarchy. This is women being the downfall of other women as well, because that's the options, and that's the power of indoctrination. So if at the very least, whether you like Islam or not, I think everybody should have the choice, and everybody should put their voices out there to continue to propagate those choices. Today on the streets, there was a lot of emotions. There's a lot of things I noticed. There's a lot of people who were passionately angry, absolutely angry, and rightfully so. These were older women in their like 70s and 80s who were angry, who wanted justice. These are not activists as well. These are just women and men who want their country back. So the least we can do is to support them, because what you're supporting is a change for humanity. It's a change in history that will be remembered. Like the Islamic Revolution took a lot away from Iranian people, but also governments and people worldwide. A lot of people who moved worldwide had to leave their homes. And I think this is our time to show our solidarity. That was it.
As an Iranian ex-Muslim, first of all, I would like to thank you for your solidarity and like attending the demonstration today. I feel very, very like flattered to see your
little flag.
thank you, to see your support and people like you. Yeah, and I think like this global movement would affect everyone's life specifically women inside the country. But thank you, Zara. Thank you for being in this program. Hopefully, we're gonna have more podcasts in future. And thank you for being so awesome and like attending such a program and being in the demonstration today. And thank you all for watching this program live. And if you guys are listening to this podcast through Spotify, please make sure that you send the link to your friends and ask them to listen to it and share it with others. And if you have something to say, you know how to find us. You can always contact the Central Committee of Ex-Muslim in Scandinavia through the website, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram page. Thank you very much. And we back shortly with another program and another podcast. Thank you and stay tuned.